Being a history person, I would like to walk you and me through history as we examine how Black people have been pivotal in transforming different sectors of society from agriculture and labor to technology. I will talk about the intersectionality of how our race, history, culture, and economic struggles have converged to influence our journey within the labor force throughout time. First of all, our skills and labor history did not begin in America with slavery. Well, according to current scientific understanding, the earliest traces of African civilization can be traced back around 300,000 years ago, marking the emergence of modern humans in East Africa. Evidence from archaeological sites develop a wide range of agricultural skills, including the domestication of crops like millet, which are small seeded grasses that can be ground into flour, sorghum, which can be eaten like rice, and yams like sweet potatoes. They were also skilled in cattle herding, soil management, and knowledge of crop rotation. They also created iron tools and hoes and axes, improving their ability to clear land and cultivate crops. As far back as 4000 BCE, more than 6,025 years ago, before the Christian era, there were advanced civilizations in Africa such as Egypt, Kush, and Axum, where Blacks built monumental structures like the Great Pyramids of Giza and Lalabella's Rock, wherein a church, imagine a church, was carved from a block of solid stone. Try to visualize this church being a solid block of stone, and skilled laborers carves out the windows, the doors, the sanctuary, and areas where worshipers sit. Think about the skills and tools needed to perform such a task. This is one of the world's most exceptional architectural treatments, which showcases the labor and ingenuity of ancient Black skilled laborers. All right. Also, they were proficient in metallurgy, which is the science of getting metal out of rocks and making metal objects. Try to imagine with me what it was like when Blacks were using their labor skills to build pyramids. They made copper tools and stone hammers to cut limestone and granite blocks as materials used for pyramid construction. They literally transported those blocks from quarries over ramps made of stone and clay and used barges to transport those blocks long distances of 560 miles or more down the Nile River to the building site. Those granite rocks weighed 2.5 tons to 15 tons, which means they were removing and transporting limestone and granite blocks weighing from 4,500 pounds to 30,000 pounds down the Nile River. Think about the skills they had to utilize in order to make that happen. Also, they utilized their skill for measuring with wooden levels, strings which measured angles and detected spots that were not level, and a square level used to level horizontal surfaces. The Pyramid of Giza, for example, was 481 feet tall. When completed, more than, I would say, 1.5 football fields. The base was about 13 acres, or the size of about 10 football fields. Everything about the pyramid was measured to precision and exact because of their advanced skills. There were huge West African empires with such men as Mansa Musa from 1312 to 1337, who oversaw the creation of vast wealth in gold mining, agriculture, and trade. Based upon recorded history, he is known as the richest man of all time, who had an estimated wealth of more than $400 billion, which is almost $180 billion more than Elon Musk and $213 billion more than Jeff Bezos, who are considered two of the richest men in the world today. I wanted to try to give you a visual of the creativity and excellent labor skills possessed by Black Americans as far back as recorded history.
All right.
To illustrate that we have always been a talented and intelligent people. And for you to see that we have a rich history of labor skills that we have contributed to society long before being enslaved in America, which started, by the way, during the Atlantic slave trade from 16th to the 19th century. It was commonly known as the triangular slave trade because the trade routes between Europe, Africa, and the Americas formed the triangle shape on the map. European goods were sent to Africa to purchase enslaved people. Those enslaved peoples were transported to the Americas to work in plantations. And finally, raw materials like sugar, tobacco, and cotton produced from the labor of enslaved Africans were shipped back to Europe to complete the cycle, the triangle. Essentially, creating three legs of trade that form a triangle. Even under those horrific circumstances, our labor skills were evident and relied upon. Let's be clear. Europeans were largely only able to acquire slaves because African coastal rulers and traders captured and sold them to the Europeans. When the Europeans raided the African continent and captured slaves, they had permission from the African rulers. African rulers also enslaved other Africans. Some were enslaved to pay off debts, punishment for crimes, for rulers to expand their kingship, and of course, economic gain. However, slavery in Africa was generally considered more flexible than European slavery, often allowing slaves to retain some rights, potentially gain freedom within their lifetime, and maintain connections with their families, while European slavery was primarily chattel slavery, wherein slaves were harshly treated, considered property with no legal rights, separated from families, and their children were automatically enslaved as well. Today, many of us cannot trace our heritage beyond slavery because of how we were separated. Most of us received the last names of the previous slave owners. And we carry those last names today. One leg of the triangular slave trade was the Middle Passage, which was a voyage between Africa and the Americas, which was experienced by millions of African captives transported across the Atlantic in European ships to work as slaves in America. Conditions aboard the ships were appalling: overcrowding, poor diet, dehydration, and disease led to high death rates. Those who resisted by refusing food and water were beaten and force-fed. Outbreaks of smallpox, syphilis, measles, and other diseases spread among the slaves. Again, I want to just give you a visual of what African blacks endured on their journey to the Americas, and once here, endured very hard labor and cruel treatment with very high death rates. Yet, despite those horrific conditions, they were the backbone of colonial economies in America, excelling in agriculture, craftsmanship, and skilled trades, even under forced labor. Skilled enslaved workers contributed to the plantation economies of sugar, cotton, and tobacco. Their labor was foundational to the growth of the American South. Now let's think about this. The Atlantic slave trade was at its peak between the 1700s and 1808. In between that time, what happened? Yes, the American Revolution from 1775 to 1787. And we were still experiencing, during that time, some of the most horrific conditions as black enslaved people. Yet, before the start of the American Revolution, Black labor had built the very foundation of the American colonies. Enslaved blacks alone were, with a few free blacks, worked as blacksmiths, carpenters, shipbuilders, and masons. They produced goods, constructed homes, and cultivated land, making economic prosperity for the colonies possible. As war broke out, their skills became even more critical. Black laborers dug trenches, built forts, and manufactured weapons and ammunition. Blacks who worked on ships and docks played an essential role in wartime logistics. Many worked on merchant and military ships, transporting goods, intelligence, and troops. Though black labor and expertise helped shape the war outcome, the promise of freedom remained unfulfilled. But black people were still very important to the birth of this nation. All right. As time went on, around the mid-1800s, you still walking with me? The issue of slavery became a major political issue. A significant debate about expanding it to other states emerged. We all know that eventually that led to the Civil War. In the Confederate South, enslaved laborers were the foundation of the economy. They worked on plantations that fueled the war effort, producing cotton, tobacco, and food for the Confederate Army. Our knowledge of agriculture, craftsmanship, and carpentry, blacksmithing, ability to repair weapons, and build fortifications was very valuable. While white men went to war, enslaved laborers were forced to take on even greater burdens, maintaining the infrastructure that allowed the South to continue fighting. However, there was resistance. Enslaved workers slowed production, broke tools, and in many cases, escaped to join the Union cause. Following the Civil War and the end of slavery in 1865, the South lay in ruin. The black labor force had built the South's wealth, was now what? Free. But freedom did not come with land, wealth, or opportunity. Nevertheless, black workers, through their knowledge of agriculture, craftsmanship, and industry, became the driving force behind the Reconstruction, which lasted for 12 years, from 1865 to 1877. During the Reconstruction era, sharecropping was a form of exploitation, but could not have functioned without the deep agricultural expertise of black farmers. You see where the labor is still there? Black artisans who were experts in their trade, along with blacksmiths, masons, and carpenters, used their skills to build homes, businesses, and entire communities. In cities and towns, black entrepreneurs established businesses, barbershops, tailors, and grocery stores, proving their expertise was not just a tool for survival, but a pathway to self-sufficiency. All this happened during the Reconstruction era. Black labor was more than just physical. It was intellectual. Reconstruction saw the emergence of black leadership in politics, law, and education. Black lawmakers in the South established public schools, advocated for labor rights, and pushed for policies that would uplift the freely slave population. However, black progress was met with fierce resistance from white supremacists through violence and legal maneuver that sought to strip black Americans of their newfound power. The rise of black codes and later the Jim Crow laws sought to suppress black labor and intellectual growth. The Reconstruction era was brief, but its impact was profound. The expertise and labor of black Americans not only rebuilt the South, but also laid the foundation for future civil rights movement. After the end of Reconstruction in 1877, African Americans found themselves in a nation determined to suppress their economic progress. Yet black labor remained essential to the Southern and national economies. Many formerly enslaved people carried forth agricultural expertise, metalwork, carpentry, and masonry skills that they had mastered during slavery, but was rarely given credit. During the 20th century, you still with me? We're in the 20th century. Oh, yeah. During the 20th century, black artisans built homes, churches, and businesses in thriving communities like the Tulsa's Greenwood District, known as the Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street is this district which contained luxury ships, restaurants, grocery stores, hotels, theaters, barbershops, saloons, blue halls, nightclubs, funeral homes, offices for doctors, lawyers, and dentists. Greenwood had its own schools, post office, banks, and hospitals. Black Wall Street was a center of black entrepreneurship and a model of resilience in the face of Jim Crow, segregation, and systemic racism. All of which was totally black owned. It was burned to the ground in 1921 race massacre when a white mob attacked the Greenwood district, setting fire to homes and businesses, and between 75 to 100 black Americans were killed and hundreds of more were injured. Around 5,000 homes were destroyed, leaving residents homeless. Also during this time, black sharecroppers and tenant farmers cultivating the land were driving force behind southern agriculture, while black domestic workers like laundresses and cooks became the backbone of American households. Despite the Jim Crow laws restricting their opportunities, black laborers persisted, demonstrating skill and professionalism even in the face of intense racism. Now, the early 20th century, which included the 1900s to the mid-1930s, also marked the Great Migration, where millions of black workers left the oppressive South for opportunities in the industrial North and the Midwest, arriving in cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. Black laborers entered steel mills, automobile factories, railroads, fueling the American industrial boom. Their expertise was undeniable, yet they often faced lower wages and the most dangerous jobs. Despite these challenges, black workers became central to union movements. Organizations like the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, led by Philip Randolph, fought for better wages and conditions, paving the way for broader labor rights. Between the 1940s and the 1960s, black laborers were excelling in skills, education, healthcare, business. Black scientists, engineers, and inventors contributed to medicine, technology, and space exploration. The Tuskegee Airmen, skilled pilots and mechanics, showcased black excellence in aviation, while black-owned businesses like Johnson Publishing and Motown revolutionized media and culture. Today, black labor continues to shape America in profound ways. In construction, transportation, and manufacturing, black workers build cities and power economies. In technology, black software engineers, data analysts, and cybersecurity experts are innovating the digital age. The expansion of black entrepreneurship in industries from finance to fashion has refined our economic power. Yet, today, in the 21st century, systemic barriers persist, requiring continued advocacy for fair wages, equal opportunities, and access to capital. Some examples included, but not limited to, workplace discrimination bias, wherein research shows that job applicants with African American sounding names receive fewer callbacks than white applicants with identical resumes, which indicated persistent bias in hiring practice. Promotion barriers, wherein African Americans often face a glass ceiling, meaning we often are limited when it comes to upward mobility within organizations, especially in leadership and executive roles. Venture capital disparities, wherein black Americans receive disproportionately small share of venture capital funding compared to white counterparts, thus limiting their opportunity to tech startups and innovation. Diversity gaps in tech companies, wherein African Americans are underrepresented because diversity initiatives often face internal resistance or lack of genuine structural support. For example, Donald Trump just issued an executive order in January pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion, known as DEI, which created new barriers to opportunity for African Americans, which is a deliberate attempt to undo the progress on diversity, and reversing progress on civil rights. With these actions, he is undoing decades of federal anti-discrimination policy since the 1964 Civil Rights Act and bullying both private and governmental entities into abandoning legal efforts to promote equity, which was designed to remedy systemic discrimination. Just this week, Google announced it's removing Black History Month off the Google calendar, claiming the removal is logistical and not a reflection of their stance on cultural awareness. Companies that are using Trump's executive order as an excuse to remove diversity as a hiring practice are Google, Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's, Boeing, Lowe's, Ford Motor Company, Harley-Davidson, just to name a few. Donald Trump and these companies are now saying you will be hired based upon your individual dignity, your hard work, and your excellence. If you believe that, I have land that I want to sell you that's located underwater in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I can cite many more examples, but the point is we have always had to perform and be innovative under adverse conditions in the labor force. But one truth remains. Black labor has always been and will always be a pillar of American prosperity. In conclusion, African Americans have long been at the heart of labor and technological progress in the United States. Our expertise, resilience, and innovation continues to shape the world. However, we must confront and eliminate the systemic barriers that hinder our full participation. By working together across industries, communities, and institutions, we can build a future that honors and uplifts African American excellence in labor and technology. Black labor has demonstrated excellence, perseverance, and expertise. Black workers have not only contributed to America's economy, but have shaped its history, its industries, and its future. Yet, there are pockets of the American society that want our contributions to be permanently erased from history or watered down. For example, book bans and censorship, wherein books are being challenged that focus on African American history, civil rights, and racial justice. Educational curriculum changes, wherein some states have passed laws that limit how topics related to race, slavery, and systemic racism are taught in public schools. These laws today are basically called critical race theory, in which public schools, K through 12, the course critical race theory is not only taught at college level, but which explores and examines American institutions where systemic racism is embedded in their policies and practices. And I repeat that. Critical race theory is a college course wherein they examine basically American institutions where systemic racism is embedded in their policies and practices. Basically, the laws are used as an excuse for public schools to teach watered-down versions of American history that overlook and or omit the struggles of the African American experience. Amen. There are 16 states that have a law that ban critical race theory from being taught in the public school. I'll repeat that. There are 16 states that have a law that ban critical race theory being taught in public school. Even though, as I have said, it is not a kindergarten through 12th grade course, and Georgia is one of the 16 states. To be clear, critical race theory is a Trojan horse used as an excuse to prevent local public schools from teaching the true history of the African American struggle. For example, Tift County High, Tift County school system used to have a curriculum, used to have an African American history course, which was taught several periods during the day. But under this, that course was gradually removed from the curriculum over the years. But under the critical race theory law, most of that content in that history course could not be taught today. So make no mistake about it. Today, in the 21st century, there are efforts to rewrite or reframe historical events that are designed to minimize and impact the impact of slavery, segregation, and systemic racism in America. Maya Angelou said, and I quote, "The more you know your history, the more liberated you are." We must be vigilant and active in making sure that we leave a generation knowledgeable of the African American heritage and the African American history. Thank you.
Amen.